This is why you should never leave your phone on silent. Once there was a woman who came home late from work and realized she didn't have her phone with her. Thinking she must have lost it, she picked up her home phone to call her own number. But when someone finally picked up, all she heard was low breathing noises on the other end. "Hello, can you hear me?" she asked. Still, there was no answer, but the breathing got even heavier. "Hello?" she asked again. And this time she heard the voice of a man on the other end. The voice said, "I hear you," and then he hung up. The woman kept calling her own number, trying to find out where her phone might be. But eventually, after getting no answer, she gave up. And this is where everything went wrong. Later, she decided to go upstairs to her bedroom. And as soon as she opened the door, she felt chills go down her spine. Placed perfectly in the middle of her nightstand was her phone. And as she reached for it and saw that it was on silent the entire time, she heard that same heavy breathing noise again. Follow for more.
Here's a story time of how me and my sisters almost got kidnapped. So my mom and her boyfriend were just gonna go out and have a night to themselves, and I was home watching my two little sisters. At the time, I was 13, my two little sisters were 9 and 6. So around 6 p.m., my mom and her boyfriend leave. Me and my sisters just sit down and watch a movie, and then I get up to make them dinner. I get paranoid really easily, and while I was making them dinner, I look out the kitchen window, and I thought I seen somebody in the backyard. I text my mom, and she gets on the cameras that are outside, and she said nobody was out there. I continue making them dinner, we sit down and eat, and then we start watching another movie. Then we start hearing knocking. It wasn't coming from any of the doors, it was coming from the side of the house. I didn't want to bother my mom on her one night out, so I just took the kids and we went upstairs and watched a movie in my room. My 6-year-old sister at the time went to the bathroom and she came back in literal tears. She was literally crying so hard until I finally got her to stop and tell me what was wrong. She said as she was walking back from the bathroom, she seen somebody downstairs. I quietly locked my door and I put my sisters in the closet and I called my mom right away. I'm running out of time, like for part 2 of how me and my sisters almost got kidnapped. I called my mom and then she looked on the cameras downstairs and somebody was in the house. She never told me what the person was doing. I guess she just didn't want me worrying, but she called 911 right away. While my two little sisters were in the closet, my 6-year-old sister would not stop crying and I'm pretty sure the person downstairs heard her. At this time, my mom and her boyfriend were already on the way and so were the police. I heard him coming up the steps, so I quietly opened the closet door and promised my sisters that they would stay quiet and be calm no matter what. I didn't know what he was here for, so I hid in the side of the bed in front of the closet so that he would get to me before he got to the girls. I heard him just rummaging through stuff and stuff breaking. Then a couple minutes later, I hear the police sirens. Right as I hear the police sirens, I hear a bedroom window smash. While trying to stay as calm as I can, 3 policemen bust down the door. They grab me and my sisters and take us outside. About 5 minutes after they take us outside and put us in the back of their car, my mom and her boyfriend shows up. About 20 minutes later after he was caught, they did notify us that he was wanted for murder of 2 younger girls and 1 adult male. About $10,000 of our stuff was either missing or broke. Then about a month later when we were capable to, we did move.
This is why you should never read someone else's diary. Once there was a girl named Samantha who took her friends to her dad's lake house because her dad grew up in the area and actually named the lake after her, Lake Samantha. But as soon as her friends arrived, they noticed something strange. There was a doll hanging on every door in all the houses in town. Samantha explained it's because of a local urban legend. Years ago, a man escaped from an insane asylum nearby, unalived his entire family, then disappeared. Since then, people would go missing around the same time every year, so the dolls were used for protection. But after spending a day by the lake, Samantha and her friends found an old diary, half buried in the dirt near an abandoned house. They opened it up and saw multiple entries dating back to the 80s. But the most terrifying part was the last entry dated August 13, 2010. And it said, "I'm so proud of my daughter. She doesn't hear the voices and she has a lot of friends. Sometimes I take her to these woods. I even named the lake after her." That's when they all heard the sound of twigs snapping behind them. And when they turned around, they saw Samantha's father, saying, "You weren't supposed to find that." Follow for more.
Storytime about my extremely creepy neighbors. So a little background information, I was 12 years old and I was in 6th grade, and my family and I lived in a really small town where everyone knew everyone, but our new neighbors had been building their house next to us for the past 4 years. And finally, when they were done with the house, this house was huge. I mean, probably because there were like 8 people moving into the house. There was the mom, the dad, 4 kids, and their grandparents. So like 8 people. But I was super excited because I was like, okay, this is awesome. I get to meet some new friends. But after 2 weeks of not seeing anybody playing in the backyard or anybody on the school bus, I started to think that their family was super weird. And everyone in our neighborhood liked to gossip, and everyone was saying how they barely see the people who had just moved in. So my mom decided to take one for the team and make some brownies, take them over to the house, and I ended up going with her. So we go up to the house, we knock on the door, and one of the kids came and opened the door, but the dad ran over and grabbed him, like for part 2. Part 2 about my extremely creepy neighbors. So like I said, my mom and I took some brownies over there, and one of the kids opened the door, and when he opened the door, he had a bunch of bruises all over his body. The dad came running over and ripped his son from the door and slammed the door in our faces, and all you could hear was him screaming at his son. So my mom and I went to walk away before the door opened, and he was like, sorry, my son knows better than to open the door to strangers. We took the brownies, and then I asked him if I could have a sleepover with one of his daughters, and he was super hesitant at first, but he said that I could only have a sleepover with her if it was at my house and not theirs, which my mom was completely fine with anyways, because she thought that it was a little bit weird that his son had bruises covering his whole body. So that night when she came over to sleep over my house, I asked her how her brother got all those bruises all over his body, and she said that he just fell down some stairs. But after that, we became best friends, and we would literally hang out like 5 times a week, until the one day I knocked on their door to ask if she wanted to come over, and her dad answered the door and said that she was gone. Like for part 3. Part 3 about my super creepy neighbors. So like I said, I became best friends with their daughter, but the one day I went over her house to ask if she wanted to come over, and her dad answered the door and said that she was gone. And when I asked when she would be back, he was like, she went to go live with her mom, so probably never. Which was super weird because she never mentioned that she had another mom. So fast forward 2 months, my family and I are sitting around the fire pit when we hear someone scream help. But we weren't sure if that's what we were actually hearing because it was so quiet, and then all of a sudden we heard someone banging on my neighbor's basement door. You know those metal doors that people usually have outside of their house that lead down basement steps? Yeah, well that's where the banging was coming from, so my dad hopped over the fence to see if that's where the screaming was coming from also, and then not even a minute later my dad hopped back over the fence and it looked like he saw a ghost, but he ran inside, called 911. Because I was so young, the only thing my parents told me about that whole situation was that the girl that I was friends with was still alive and her parents were keeping her in the basement along with 2 of her other siblings, but then we also found out that they weren't even her real parents. They were kidnapped at the hospital when they were born. Story time about why I will never go Black Friday shopping ever again. So a little background information, I was 13 and in 8th grade, and my best friends and I were super excited because we'd never been Black Friday shopping before. So we had a plan that all of us would spend the night at my house and my mom would drive us to the mall at 4 in the morning. So fast forward, it's 4 in the morning and my friends and I are ready to go to the mall, and my mom came with us, but we didn't stay with her the whole time. So as we were walking to the first store, we realized that there were these 3 guys behind us that have kind of been following us around since we got into the mall. But we just think it's a coincidence because, you know, it's Black Friday, the mall is packed. There are obviously going to be people going the same exact way as us. So we go into the first store, we get what we want to get, and the men didn't follow us in there. But as we're making our way to the next store, we realized that they're following us again. It was like they waited outside the first store for us to come out. So then we decided that we were going to walk around one of the kiosks a few times to see if they were really following us. And of course they were, so we went into another store and they didn't follow us in that one either. So I go up to one of the workers and I asked if they could possibly like call security or something because there are these guys following us, and she said yeah, like for part 2. Part 2 about why I will never go Black Friday shopping ever again. So like I said, my friends and I go into the one store, and of course they don't follow us in there, so we ask an employee if they can call security. So whenever security got there, I told them that these guys have been following us around since we got into the mall. And then security's like, well, where's your mother? Acting like it was our fault that we could be kidnapped for not being with my mom. So after that, he's like, all right, just go find your mom, you know, I'll talk to them. So I call my mom and I'm like, hey, where are you? Of course, she's on the whole other side of the mall. So my friends and I are going to meet her on the other side of the mall, and we look back to see if the security guard was talking to them, and literally the security guard just walked out of the store and went the complete opposite way. Then we walk up to the security guard and we're like, you didn't even talk to him. And then he turns around, rolls his eyes, goes over and starts talking to these guys. And then we continue to the store that my mom was at whenever we decided to stop at Starbucks to get something to drink. So after 10 minutes of waiting in line, you know, we turn around and we see these guys standing at the end of the line just staring at us. So we get out of line and we decided to just go straight to the store that my mom was at. And when we got there, we told her what was going on. So she was like, okay, let me get these few things and then we can leave, like for part 3. Part 3 about why I will never ever go Black Friday shopping ever again. So like I said, we got out of line and we went straight to the store that my mom was at, and she was like, okay, just let me get these few things and then we can leave. So we start walking towards the exit, and then I'm like, Mom, they're still following us. So she turns around and she realizes they're literally standing 2 feet behind us. So we decided to go into one of the stores and we asked one of the employees if they could also call the head of security. And whenever head of security got there, she literally tore them a new you-know-what. After that, my mom tries to go and point out the guys, and they're not standing there anymore. So they're like, well, what do you want us to do? And then my mom's like, well, you can walk us out to our car. So they walk us out to our car, and then they stand there while we're getting in. My mom starts the car and she starts backing up, and we literally run over something. And all of a sudden we hear like screaming and moaning, and the security guards look under the car, and literally one of the guys who was following us is literally laying under our cars with a knife. And as soon as that happened, there was literally a van parked right across from our car. The van drove away really fast, but the police ended up catching up to it, and they found like 8 girls in that van.